Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100. Or Mott's.
Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals discusses the AFI Top 100. Tonight we're going to be talking about the classic 1994 film, one of Tarantino's best, I think everyone would say, Pulp Fiction. So I am your host, Steve Ramosi, which I think I already said, and I'm joined tonight by Scott Thurlow.
Bad motherfucker.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Hello, this is number 94 on the, which is odd.
Yep, 94 in 94, well, yeah. Indeed. Yep.
It is number 94, that's correct. And Christopher Morgan.
Royale with cheese.
All right, so Ian, I believe you have a funny line for us.
We all want to be Jules, but we're really Jimmy in our kitchen.
We're just Jimmy. Don't fucking Jimmy me, Jules.
Well played. All right, so let's talk about the plot. Chris, why don't you kick us off?
Well, there is a narrative to the film, and if it were to put in the correct timetable, there wouldn't really be much of a through line. So what they did was they mashed it up. This is a narrative. The best I'm going to say, it is a world in Los Angeles. Let's say, for lack of a better term, crime scene. This is a weekend in the life of a bunch of gangsters, and
freaking out Marcellus Wallace.
Yeah, and it's divided up into segments. So I'll let Ian get to the whys and wheres when he gets the themes, but basically they took a narrative and they broke it up and created a different narrative by taking things out of context and putting them back into context and, kind of toying with your perceptions. I actually saw this film in 1984 in the movie theater. I mean, like I said, it's a fascinating experiment, technically. As a film, I think it's great overall. The problem I have with it is the whole butch section of it. Even when I was seeing it in 94, I felt like the pacing basically stopped. One of the great things about switching up from my VHS to my DVD is that I could skip over it. No, because I don't really like him. My favorite part of that, what I rewatch, is when he's in the taxi cab with
Esmeralda de los Lobos.
Villalobos, yeah. Esmeralda Villalobos, yeah.
Yeah, and but other than that, I loved. It's really hard to talk about this and not get into the characters or the themes, but overall, I really enjoy it. It's got great pacing. And it does. I like the way it mucks with perception and perspective. But I'm going to give this a 2.
So I guess I'll go. Full disclosure, yeah, it's one of my favorite movies just generally. And the funny thing is, we were all like sort of BSing a precast that I was like, I wasn't sure. Like, going to this week, is it going to hold up? Like, yeah, I think it does, and we'll expand upon that for sure. Like I said, Chris, like, it's sort of Tarantino's mark, or at least put him on the map for sure. This was after Res Dogs, but before Jackie Brown, I believe, as we figured out, right? So, like, yes, it has the chapter thing, which he's done before, and which many other films have done, followed suit with, like, kind of using that jumbled up, not in chronological order, but telling you bits of the narrative as they sort of mismatch, and then in retrospect, you can put it together. So, like, I think I'm going to give it a 3. I think it does hold up because of it. And it, again, admittedly, it might be because of my bias here and there, because once you've seen this film once and you, upon subsequent watches, like, you get more out of it in a sense, or what's coming, so therefore you can, like, know in your mind how the events are supposed to unfold versus the way the film presents them to you. But I still think it works either way for me. So
I'm going to admit off the bat that I am going to be quoting a great show that unfortunately is off YouTube now, called After Hours. And they had a really good point about how this is a movie, three distinct movies with three distinct protagonists, each with their own point of views and what's important to them. So you have the first through line, as you used the term earlier, Chris, with Vince Vega and him having to take out his boss's wife and all of the tragedy that unfurls there. Then you have Butch, the boxer, on the run, and you have then Jules as he reconsiders his life as a gangster. And each of them has a distinct style to them, although there is kind of a
Still overarching glue.
overarching style there.
Holds it, yeah.
But the thing is, like, the details are different. Because each character has different things that are important to them. In fact, basically, Jules and Vince's stories overlap, but you get to see what's important to each of them. And I think all three stories are fantastic. So I'm probably going to give this a 3.
Yeah, so Chris, when you gave it a 2, I was like for a brief moment reconsidering whether I was going to give it a 3, but I don't think I am. I really think that this movie does a great job of telling 3 different stories and connecting them and like making them jive into the overarching story of what's going on under the umbrella of Marcellus Wallace, I guess, is like the kind of glue that holds them all together. I think it's a really great tight wire act that Tarantino is just known for doing this type of thing throughout his career, and he's always very good
Because
at
of this movie.
I mean, yeah, but because of all the rest of his movies too, like he just is awesome at writing a script that makes things that seem like they shouldn't necessarily work together, or like making a scene of dialogue that seems like it should be very boring into something very interesting. And he does it throughout this movie. I have to give full credit for that in terms of plot. Yeah, so I'm going to give it a 3. I get the 2, and I get, especially if you don't like Butch's story.
Yeah, but I mean, I want you to understand that it's one of these things where I understand why Butch's story was there, and that the need for a third protagonist and tell a story. I just so you know, my point with Butch's thing is I was not invested in his character.
Or at least engage with that part of it. Yeah.
Honestly, I saw like the thing,
but I felt like parts of it were more exploitative just to be it. I out of all the storylines, I'm just going to say this is the one I didn't gel as much for me. So I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying. I was like sitting here going, is that enough for me to give a 3? No. If I'm going to be honest with you, when I rewatch this film, and I've watched it a lot, I think one of the benefits of this film, especially on rewatch, especially in the digital age, is you can take a storyline and watch that storyline. Mm-hmm. Or you could take this, you could play mix and match with the storylines. So, I mean, like I said, it's not.
So you're a better director than Tarantino?
I get what you mean, Chris.
Puzzles. Let's put it that way. No, so I want to let you know that, there was just this one part of the film that just didn't gel for me.
I get what you mean. And that part of the film worked fine for me in terms of like the overarching story that he had. But what really nails it home for me is that you take all 3 parts of these stories, and like honestly, I really think that adding in making 3 different stories into one was like a Tarantino flex. He wanted to see what he could do, basically, and he did it. I think he pulled it off really well. But I get it. If you don't like the Butch storyline, that's fine. You got 2 other fucking movies there to watch, so you get that going for you. But yeah, I'm going to stick with a 3, and that's a 2 for you, Chris. You're sticking with that? Okay, cool. Ian, why don't you move us along to themes?
All right, so we start off with Vincent Vega. He is dealing with temptation throughout his movie. Both the temptations he's already succumbed to, which he's a drug addict. He's lazy. He's doesn't handle authority too well, and he's dealt with the greatest temptation ever, a hot Uma Thurman who is his boss, is
gangster boss,
boss, and he successfully completes that test. But in the end, he succumbs in other people's stories to his worst traits. In Butch, which is my favorite of the thing, because I'm kind of smart. He is a person who does con the basically throws the fight in order to make bets. He gets paid to throw the fight and decides not to win. He bets himself to win, and he makes much money and a lot of enemies. And it's really an exploration of, and this is an old school kind of trope in cinema, a narrative, which is you have to earn your rewards. You have to go through some level of suffering in order to come out the other end on a success. And Butch goes through that suffering. He earns his victory, his escape from that life. And it's all about that fight for him, which is why I like it quite a bit. And then you have Jules, who actually has a test himself. He is giving up the gangster lifestyle and is confronted with petty crooks. And he has to say, reject who he used to be in order to, and he lets them go, of course, because it's a Tarantino film, but he has to reject his baser instincts and actually, not just through words, but through actions, decide to become a better man. So it's, I see all of those kind of tied together through a through line of thematics. And also, just one last point is, actually, Tarantino, I think, is making fun of a lot of the kind of people who love his movies, because throughout it, you have lower class people here who would like to put on airs of French. You have Tim Roth at the beginning, use garçon, and the waitress chastises him for using it incorrectly. You have Vincent Vega, who's very much into French style, but they don't know how to appreciate the art. All they can do is just kind of mimic it poorly. Whereas Tarantino is, I think, in his ego and estimation, is mimicking it correctly.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe to the latter point, but I do agree with what you started off with. Like, yes, each of the characters, those are their thematic, like, attached to the journeys they go through. And I think it's always worked. And, like, again, I may say this as we go along, but I'll try to, like, keep it to a minimum. I wasn't sure if this movie was going to get stale for me, like, specifically viewing it because for a podcast, for an AFI episode, but it didn't. And the themes still shine through, and it still does a good job of portraying that. So I'm going to give it a 1 just on that front.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a good job of exploring some of the themes so far. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the theme of Vincent Vega always being in the bathroom for every problem. And then as soon as the moment he doesn't have his partner with him to save his ass coming out of the bathroom, he gets fucking shot and killed. Which I really always loved. And like, always
it was a funny little touch that's always been.
I always keyed into on this movie. I don't know why, but like, it's funny because Mike, my brother, you guys know Mike, seems to always be in the bathroom at most inopportune times.
He's a very Vincent Vega like.
He's a Vincent Michael
Vega like guy. But yeah, so you got that. Like, I think that's something that not necessarily a theme of the movie, but like a small little side theme that Tarantino wanted to throw in here, and
sure.
It's just a fun little thing,
a fun little detail. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. There is the aware of the gangster life that Jules starts to feel and like is feeling throughout the movie, and like finally decides to get out. And I think it is ironic, like, you know, as dumb and little side as the thing I just mentioned is like it's interesting that the moment that he gets out is the moment that his partner is all alone in a situation and gets murdered, right? Like, so there's that thing, like, you know, trying to better yourself perhaps hurts other people sometimes, and you know, who knows what Tarantino was actually going for with that. If that was like a statement of his, or if that was just like an incidental thing, but that's in there. And, you know, seeing Ving Rhames as Marcellus Wallace is really fascinating. Like, he's kind of like a gangster philosopher throughout the movie, which I really love. He's got all these like interesting little asides and like things that he says and like talks about, and to the same degree, like perhaps even to a much larger degree, Jules is the same way. a gangster philosopher, right? Like he's always trying to search for the meaning of what he's doing, while he's committing these horrible acts, right? Like
Also, he likely gave up his soul, and that's what's in the briefcase.
You
That's
sure?
all the thing.
Popular theory.
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows what's in the briefcase? Could be Jules' soul, but regardless, I mean, and honestly, what the mystery in the briefcase is probably also another like somewhat of a theme, right? Like the gangster is always chasing the fool's gold to an extent. Like there's some there's some other shiny object that they're going to be chasing next, and that's always it. And like it's always going to catch your eye, but it's not necessarily going to solve any of your problems and things like that. So like that's an interesting thing that's in the movie. And there's a ton more. Like this movie, like Tarantino is always one for trying to cram as much meaning into stuff as he possibly can, and usually does a pretty good job. So I got to give it full credit. I'm gonna leave off with those that I've mentioned and give it a 1.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Roger Avery wrote a lot of the stories with him. Tarantino wrote the screenplay, but I want to give him credit because he is a part of this. I love the briefcase. I know a lot of that's very divisive, but my defense of it is they made a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
It's just like it doesn't matter, so let's make something that doesn't matter. I mean, it's really great, and I do like getting back to the theme of Vince dying when he's not Jules. Jules tried to worm him too, so Jules is like you got to see what happened to Vince, and then you see that at the end Jules was right. You know, for lack of a better word. That's all I'm going to say. Just 2 things that I observed.
Oh, and also, I think the most important theme in all Tarantino films are feet are sexy.
Feet are sexy.
Are important, and it means something.
But a reason to get fucking thrown out a window for, perhaps. Also, I wanted to mention, I believe there was a similar MacGuffin in the movie Ronin, 1998 Robert De Niro movie, which I recall seeing in theaters. Just wanted to throw that off there.
Sure.
But all right, let's move on. Scott, why don't you talk about antagonists?
So, since what we just cut up, I think each of the characters has their own antagonist, and I guess you might say Marcellus Wallace, but that isn't quite true. So I think it's more nuanced than that, right? And like, especially in Jules' case, he's struggling with, as you guys said, questioning his life choices and lifestyle, and that is his antagonist. And he's trying to explain it to his good friend and partner, Vince Vega, John Travolta, like, who can't quite comprehend that. Meanwhile, Butch is trying to escape, get out of town because he double-crossed the gangster, like, who asked him to go down, to take a fall. So, like, I think it all crosses over. Like, each of them, I'm not going to give you, this is the opposite case in which I would normally say, like, some broad overarching thing. I think they each specifically have their own antagonist or antagonistic force against them because it's 3 stories intertwined that sort of cross over and meet up and then go away and then meet up again, perhaps it's down the line. So all I'm saying is that I'm going to give it a 1, but I think it is more tangible, as you might like to corporeal here, as Steve-O likes to point to. But I think that is the case, and that is my reasoning for giving it a 1.
Sure, I think it's for Butch, it's Marcellus Wallace. For Jules, it's his own like ethos, right? And his own ethics, or his center of morality, and
revelation that he has too.
And for Vince, it's his bowels throughout the movie. I think those are the 3 antagonists. They're all great.
I'm going to disagree with you one part on that though, because Butch is his arc is partly reclaiming his family's honor, in a way, in the semblance of the gold watch. That's actually the title of his thing. So he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that damn watch being left behind.
But I'm not sure he's ever reclaiming his family's honor.
But that entire thing represents all the suffering. Christopher Walken says it best, discussing shoving the thing up his ass. As this is the struggles all of your family members have had to have, and now it is your is your turn to go to war, but a different type of war. And he comes out not only screwing over Marcellus Wallace, but having Marcellus Wallace, in a sense, forgive him for that. He gets his honor back as a thief and leaves a warrior.
I mean, I get what you mean. I just don't see him as like being. I never got the impression that he was super considerate about his father's legacy. I think that all he thought was like it almost felt to me like this watch is me, not my father. In terms of this movie, like I never felt like he linked it to his father or like he had any kind of like particular connection to his father. I felt like
history in general. It goes back to his like great grandfathers like that.
Yeah, it does, but I don't think that like they tell the story, but like I never felt from the performance or from the script that like he was super interested in it. It was more of a point of pride, his own pride.
Fucking with you.
Than that he actually, yeah, exactly. Like, and it almost felt like a point of his own pride that like he wasn't allowed to allow anybody to fuck with his family's honor. But it's not because he actually gave a shit about his family per se. It was more of like this is built in. I don't know how to describe this. I don't know if you guys know what I'm saying.
All honor is inherently selfish. But
yeah, well, yeah, that's what I think. I think it's like he's not necessarily interested because you don't actually see him say anything about anything that you knew about his father or his grandfather, and I guess because he didn't really know them or whatever. But like, he's not interested in them. He's interested in the watch, which is the only
trust or something like that.
Yeah,
in a way.
It's the watch is kind of a part of himself more so than a part of his family, I think.
Huh.
And that's why he doesn't want to let it go, right?
Well,
maybe. I don't know.
Think about the watches, and I'm listening to what you guys are talking about. I'm understanding now why this didn't gel for me. But I'm not about to start nitpicking it because we're probably going to run long as this. But the thing about the watch the one thing I always liked about the walk-in speech was I never got that it was his actual father's watch, that he had to go and tell his son that his dad wasn't coming home. So he brought him anything and came up with this elaborate story that there's this trinket that passed down. This is why I always found the story interesting, because I assumed Christopher Walken was lying about it because he didn't know what to say to his son. So he brought this watch over.
I never got that out of it.
I kind of like that. Yeah.
This mythos. So like I started there and it didn't gel for me. And, you know, the whole thing at the end I felt was a little contrived about how he gets his redemption, for lack of a better word, with Marcellus. But Ian, what you were saying about what you got out of it, I thought was interesting because it wasn't even like, you know, I was like, wow, how did you get that? You know? So, I mean, but
I took it as face value that people have watches up their asses.
I figured the watch was just another MacGuffin.
Gotta watch up my ass right now.
Butch didn't have a briefcase, so he had a watch.
I'll say one more thing. If we're moving on, that there was a point in which after Jules and Vince Vega go to the apartment and then they shoot Marvin, then the antagonist for them is like the action of that. Like it becomes its own little side plot. So no matter what's happening, I'm saying my final evidence is that each character is in fact antagonized by something throughout the film, and it's all effective throughout. All
right, so let's give it a score. One's all around?
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, protagonist, me. The three protagonists, right? Like Vincent, Jules, and Butch. I enjoy all three of them. I think they all do a very good job. We've talked extensively about all three of them already, so I don't have too much more to say. I just think that they all have their own story. They're all very different from each other, and as I believe you mentioned earlier, Ian, all three of these parts are filmed in a slightly different way so that they're very distinct from each other. I think that it's really well done in terms of that. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Fuck yeah, I was going to say that they're distinct characters, and their stories are told in largely differing aspects, like in a sense, like I don't know how to describe it, but they're shown from a different angle because of who they are. And I think the Tarantino in the film does a good job of like quickly enough setting them up, like so like who they are and what they're about, and then going on from there and exploring it. So and of course like the casting choice is spot on. So that's pretty much all I gotta say, and definitely giving it a 1.
Yep. Me too.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Sounds good. All right.
All you had to say,
Chris,
apparently.
why don't you talk about supporting characters then?
And this is why. That's what I said. I'm probably going to mention the one that everybody wants to mention, but I'm going to mention Winston Wolfe. Number 1, it's Harvey Keitel, and he's magnificent. Number 2, there is this
Best Harvey Keitel role ever.
There's this little runner in the thing where at Jimmy's place where they're trying to get rid of Marvin's body, and Jules makes this whole thing about his coffee, and they have this whole discussion, and Wolf goes, Jimmy, could you make me a cup of coffee? Sure. So he goes in there, hands him the coffee. He goes to talk to the guys, takes a sip, turns around and goes, and then turns back.
Of course, everyone knows that moment, yeah.
But to be honest with you, that is my favorite Winston Wolfe moment. All that he does, that is just so perfect. There's a lot of characters here to discuss. I am just going to throw out Honey Bunny because Amanda Plummer.
Yep. Amanda Plummer.
Amanda Plummer, not Amanda Palmer.
Not Amanda Plummer. No, Amanda Plummer. Amanda Plummer, Honey Bunny. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I feel you. Of course, Winston Wolfe is possibly one of my favorite characters in films in general, like ever. But I guess we got to give y'all. Not I guess we should give Mia credit. Uma, because like she's like almost like she's on the banner of the movie, the poster and stuff. But she's definitely not a main character, but she's a very good supporting character, at least in Vince's portions journey, right? So and she's a very good job there. And like you're right, everyone like Tim Roth as well, Honey Bunny and Amanda Plummer and Tim Roth, like Honey Bunny and what does he call him? Yeah. Oh no, what does Samuel L. Jackson call him? Ringo.
Oh, Ringo, yeah.
Right. So like they all fill out the world for sure, and it all works for me. Of course, yes. Number 1, Harvey Keitel as such, but everything else also works.
Not only are all the secondary characters memorable, from Wolf to who I was through most of my 20s and the drug dealer.
Eric Stoltz. You can get yeah, that's right.
But even like the tertiary characters, the chick on the couch smoking the bong for the entire events.
Zed,
Jemmy as Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
Even the tertiary characters have a little bit of character to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
I can't not give this a 1.
Yeah, I mean, it really does do all of everything you guys said. I have to absolutely give a shout out to Marvin. The first time I ever saw Phil Lamar, like, right? Fucking amazing. I forgot, there were a couple other people I want to mention. I just mentioned Buscemi as Buddy Holly, the server. You guys said Tim Roth, Amanda Plummer. There's somebody.
Ving as Marcellus. We didn't. We mentioned him earlier, but he's definitely a very good supporting character.
You guys just said Eric Stoltz. Obviously, Uma Thurman. I think we.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a stacked cast and of people that
absolutely
a lot of people that weren't big at the time, but became big, almost in the same way as like
he resurrected the career of John Travolta, only for John Travolta to sink it again for a second time.
Yeah, exactly. But I think supporting characters are very strong in this movie, and they really fill out the world. That's a lot of what this movie's about, is this world feeling full.
Yeah.
And feeling like an alive place, and I think that deserves a very strong 1. So I think we're all going to agree on that, right?
Yep, F&A.
Cool. Dialogue. Ian, talk to us about it.
I think this is one of the features that Tarantino is most known for, and it's one of his movies are heavily quoted. I think this is one of the most heavily quoted films out there. Yeah, it overall, like, even upon repeat, this is probably upwards of the 10th time, if not more, I've
Yep.
seen this film.
Same.
And it still holds up dialogue-wise, except for, and I think this was a problem back then too, something you brought up, Steve-O, with the use of certain racial language in this is debatable on its taste. But overall, I think I have to say that one of the hallmarks of Tarantino, as I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you maybe speak more about it, Steve, because I know you mentioned earlier, but just in general, I was telling you, like, I found myself, like you said, we still quote it just in general, like, everyday use, like conversation here and there. And so, again, I wasn't sure, like, is it going to hold up? Like, I found myself unironically, saying the lines along with the film as I was watching it, and like, yep, still awesome, like, still holds up, etc. for the most part. And like you said, yeah, Tarantino is, if nothing else, like, that's one of his hallmarks, as one of his, like, that's what he focuses on. And this is clearly the one, or at least to me, the one that sort of put him on the map / catapulted him. It's the one that's in the AFI, anyways, in general. So yeah, it works and it still holds up. And I'm giving it a 1 without commenting upon that specific thing. I'll let you do that.
Yeah, so we had a drawn out conversation about this yesterday, I believe, and I'm gonna try to do an abridged version of it. Yes, I think the dialogue is terrific. As in all things that Tarantino does, he knows how to make dialogue compelling and really, really good. He also tends to sprinkle in phrases and words that are not PC or whatever, what have you. And I think the way that I said it yesterday was like, I feel like this gave a lot of people in the 90s, because they thought this movie was so cool, license to use racial slurs because it felt like it was so cool to do. And it's gonna be an argument on both sides of that for sure. But I don't think that Tarantino had racist intent,
Ill intentions,
but it could have. But I think that it did allow people. It made people feel okay using some racist terms in like everyday language that they probably shouldn't be fucking using, and that's the biggest problem that I have with this. Chris is doing something weird.
Sorry.
Headphones. What do you think, buddy?
No, my ears just kind of
What do you think about that?
dialogue.
Yeah.
You're the only one that hasn't spoken on it yet.
Sorry about that. I apologize. I was having a problem with my headphones. Yeah, I'm gonna give the dialogue a 1, but I'm also gonna say this about Tarantino. In my opinion, he's made 3 films, and everything was. The problem was, I feel like this was so popular, and this is something that defined him, and everybody talking about it kind of proves that thing. Is like, I feel like he never quite escaped this movie with regard to dialogue, and to an extent, Reservoir Dogs as well, because
Sure.
I love, despite I know this movie gets a lot of hate, and I actually loved 2/3 of it, and then it became Reservoir Dogs. But that does not diminish the what is in this film and the dialogue in this film, and while I think the disputed word is more flashy here, where it would be a little more organic in something like Jackie Brown, where it was used in certain contexts by certain people. Here it's thrown around willy-nilly. So I kind of agree with you to a certain degree, where this kind of did give it some flash and some style. While I don't think that was the intent, I can see what you said about that.
It might have had that effect beyond it.
When I said that we all want to be Jules, but we're all Jimmys, that was actually also including Quentin Tarantino, because he's no Samuel L. Jackson. He is himself in the kitchen drinking coffee. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Just like a dork.
Fair enough. But that said, we're all giving dialogue a 1, and
Yes.
let's move on to style. Scott.
Alrighty, so like I think Chris did a nice segue where it put him on the map. It is of course the one that's selected for the AFI, and maybe I don't know, buddy, if like not even necessarily can't escape it, but it certainly follows him around. Like it was a culturally and pop culturally impactful moment and catapulted him into stardom. So I still think it certainly stands, and because of the fact like it's sort of like the prototype where it does chapters, right? And it's all out of order. Like you can clearly see, you can draw a line from this film to many others like that followed it. And I would say, especially for talking about just Quentin himself, from here to like, let's say Hateful Eight, like that's the one I think that followed like the sort of template structure the most. So like, but I think it still works. Like, and maybe it's possibly that it upon like, after your initial viewing and then you go back and watch it, you can then like what's coming, so like what events are in order. But because it sort of shakes them up and like sort of sidelines you a little bit, I think it still certainly works. And you got to talk about the soundtrack, of course, because that's always also an integral part of Tarantino's films, and it works like amazingly well here too. Like again, it's the prototype / Irish thing to me that so many other films from that era and even into this, into the present day have followed and took taken cues from. That I would say dialogue / style to me is like the biggest, the most impressive part of this film, and because that's what Tarantino was good at, and I would say still is. And so therefore, I'm giving it a 1. It's just that I feel you can still feel its resonance to this day, and that's why you have to give it credit because of that.
Yeah, I think that honestly, Chris, I would disagree with you when you say that Tarantino's only made 3 movies. Although I would like to hear which 3 movies you think that he has made. But I think that every single one of his movies, I'll give you a moment to talk about that in a second, but I think that every one of his movies are completely different. And this one really, because he's trying to do something different in every single one of his movies, he's trying to do a different genre or a different style or a different feel. But the thing is, he's such a student of film that he knows exactly what to do to make those films feel the way that he wants them to feel. And I think that this one is perhaps one of his best works in terms of that. And like one of his most, I don't know, like, this is, what is his second movie, I think?
I believe so, yeah.
And
it was Res Dogs first.
Yeah. So, but he really feels like he came into his, to be honest, Tarantino, to me, hasn't made a bad movie, but I think that his earlier movies I like probably a little bit better. But regardless, you can never say that Tarantino's style is off. Like if we're talking about style, it's Tarantino, and he is half style, if not more, in any given movie. Like.
Which is really funny you say that, because that's I'll get to that when I talk about. But yeah, continue, Steve.
I'll let you go. Ian, go ahead.
Criticizing Tarantino's style is criticizing the history of world cinema.
Why? Because he can be so derivative.
Because here's the thing: it's strange. In a sense, I don't like his style for how much he steals, but in a sense, I'm impressed by how he steals scenes, steals concepts, and implements.
He's the best thief I've ever seen.
Yeah, but it's almost like to do like a Banksy thing where he took the picture and painted something on it and returned it. Like that's the like he takes other work people have done, sometimes great work, sometimes very niche works, and just combines them in unique fashions.
Try to say Moriarty's shitty for stealing things.
Right?
He's a good remixer.
Like the Butch thing, he goes from kind of a Western to a samurai flick to a Deliverance style all in one. I think his uniqueness comes not in his originality, but the original combinations of other styles.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's impressive. That's an art form in itself.
Yeah,
All right. What I mean was, I feel like after Jackie Brown, he kind of circled back on himself a lot. Like there's not been like when I watched The Hateful Eight, and this is before I saw Good, Bad, and the Ugly, but I'm still going to give Hateful Eight. What I loved about it is it didn't feel like a Tarantino film. It felt like, you know, he made Reservoir Dogs and he made Pulp Fiction. And then Jackie Brown, and it was so. All three of these movies are so different from one another. And I felt like he kept returning to the well. When I mean he made 3 films, it wasn't that that he made it the same way. I think he does return to a lot of the same themes, the same styles. I don't feel like a lot of diversity in his films. Like I said, the one that had me the most, I know, Steve, I knew you were going to hate this conversation, but I'm going to say it anyway.
It just doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, no, seriously. When last summer, I fucking hated Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the thing was, it was another Hollywood hand job. I just felt like it was him being...
Well, what movie was that? Which of the 3 movies was that?
Actually, to back you up, Chris, for a second, I have heard the theory that there's 3 periods of Quentin Tarantino. One going up until the first 3 films, then he combines kind of the more genre-specific films, and then he goes into historical revisionist films. And those are the 3 periods of Quentin Tarantino. I saw an academic article on it. I'm just saying that it's...
Ian, that is definitely true, but I don't think that's what Chris is trying to say. I think he's trying to say...
No. I'm just saying. I wanted to throw that in there somewhere. And I thought this was a good time to do so.
I agree with you. I mean, like I said, Tarantino just... There's one of those things where I kind of feel like I said, The Hateful Eight's the perfect example of where I feel like he got to a certain point and just made Reservoir Dogs again. And I feel like that, like Django Unchained was fine. It was okay. Like I liked parts of it, and other parts I thought he was getting too stylistic. I mean, and it's Steve, you're giving me that look. It's a matter of taste. We all have our different opinions. His filmmaking after Jackie Brown doesn't consistently work for me.
Sure, you weren't as impressed with it, but I get you. But are you giving?
I'm just very confused. Like, I'm not saying you have to like the movies, but I'm confused with you saying that they're like that. Hateful Eight is the same as, what did you say, Reservoir Dogs?
It kind of like I would kind of.
But it's that. If you say that, yes, every Quentin Tarantino movie is the exact same movie. If you say that, like they all like it's him making a movie, doing all these different genres and like takes on them. Yeah, he makes the same kind of movie every time he makes a movie.
I'm not saying you can't reference
like basically
yourself.
Every director does.
No, I wouldn't say that.
But I mean,
so when we were talking about The Irishman, I was talking about Scorsese. When I looks back on his career, like it or love the films, overall, he may have made things in similar worlds, but I don't ever feel like he made the same film. Like if you look at something like Hugo, and what was the one about Buddha, the Dalai Lama? I'm blocking it. And then you look at things like Taxi Driver and the other one with Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis.
That's every movie he's ever made.
Like Irishman is Casino and fucking Goodfellas, right? Like it's those movies. if you want to like boil it down like that, I mean it's a completely different movie.
No, but my point was when he made The Irishman after having this long career, The Irishman just felt so derivative, based upon everything he had done. And that's the trap I feel personally that Tarantino falls in. You can disagree, and obviously by the look on your face, you do disagree. I'm just saying that Tarantino is, while I appreciate what he did for film, and I really like other parts of his other films, he's not one of my favorite directors.
I'll say this. Without going too into depth of it, I think that if you want to make
20 minutes too late on that.
If you want to make the argument, Tarantino has made the same exact movie every single movie of his entire career. However, I think that the interesting thing about his career is in the different, like he tells a story his way in different genres, and he keeps trying to do a different mode of story or a different type of story, and like that's what's interesting about it.
That's fair to me. I feel like, are we not giving Style one anyways?
Style's a woman.
I'm only giving that we just veered off the whole thing.
He built Jackrabbit Slims.
All right, so Styles 1, we're gonna go on to recommend. That's gonna be me. Yes, I recommend it. Go watch Pulp Fiction. If you haven't watched it yet, what the fuck's wrong with you? Watch the fucking movie.
Yes, sorry, I know I'm gonna recommend it. I think I'm gonna give it a 10. So it is very low on the AFI number, 94 as we mentioned. I personally would move it up, and maybe we'll we'll go over this territory when we get to the next special we do when we cover all of the AFI. But I am officially, of course, recommending Pulp Fiction. Yes, still holds up. Yes, it might have its subtle nuances that the cracks in it are a little bit there, but for the most part, 80% or more worth it. Still works. Check it out.
So, like a lot of people my age, this introduced me to film, or really a deeper. It transitioned from enjoying movies to appreciating films, and also the kind of pursuit of creative endeavors. Because Tarantino was one of us who made it, even though he's a generation above us. But like that kind of a nerdy film geek, and he inspired so much. So yeah, I have to say this is an important film for me, but it's also for film in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was doing the math on the generation because I think am I almost a generation older than you?
I think he's around your age. Yeah.
You're not in our generation, that's for sure.
No, I think he's several years older than me. I recommend this film.
I don't know if he's several years older than you.
I'm going to go with several. The guy's 75. I'm just kidding.
Tarantino's 75. He's not 75.
I'm fucking with you, dude. I've been fucking with you. I'm not saying what my nitpicks weren't valid, but I also just like fucking with you at times. Yeah, of course, I'm going to fucking recommend this movie. This movie's great.
Actually, he's the reverse of 75.
Despite my nitpicks, one of the wonderful things about this movie is that if I want to see something, I can watch, a storyline and move on. Or if I want to keep watching that scene in the kitchen because it's just so. But it is. There's a lot going on in this film, and I think regardless of I don't like the Butch storyline, but I appreciate why it's there. I appreciate the mechanics of it. There's a lot to appreciate with this film. I think it definitely should be a lot fucking higher on the AFI. It's a 94. But yeah, it should be on there. I highly recommend it. It is a very good film. And that's it.
Agreed. All right, so that's going to give us 3 10s. Ian, Scott, and I are all giving it 10s, and a 9 for Chris, the old curmudgeon of the group, who took off a point for plot because of his distaste for Butch.
I actually understand after talking about it actually why it didn't gel for me.
Yeah. But so that's where we're gonna leave off, 9.75 total. And anybody else have anything else to say?
No, I think that's about right. Like, I guess obviously I gave it a perfect 10 on our score, and I might give it a 9.75 outside of this, but either way, it's within striking distance, within range, and holds up very, very well and spot on.
I would agree. On our scale, it's a 10, but I might on another scale give it slightly less than a 10, but pretty close. And so.
Paying for nostalgia doesn't work here, and I would probably give it a perfect score.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, that's going to do it for us. I have been your host, Stephen Hermosi, joined tonight by Scott Thurlow.
I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd over here.
Jonathan E. Manzer.
Look at the big brain on Steva.
And Christopher Morgan.
That is a tasty burger.
Indeed. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.